her that she may get well and live." He went off with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed upon him. There was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet she was not helped, but only grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." Immediately her flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Jesus, aware at once that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who has touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to Jesus, "You see how the crowd is pressing in upon you, and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. The woman, realizing what had happened to her, approached in fear and trembling. She fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be cured of your affliction." While he was still speaking, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any further?" Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid, just have faith." He did not allow anyone to accompany him inside, except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they arrived at the house of the synagogue official, he caught sight of the commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. So he went in and said to them, "Why this commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but asleep." And they ridiculed him. Then he put them all out. He took along the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and entered the room where the child was. He took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." The girl, a child of 12, arose immediately and walked around. At that they were utterly astounded. He gave strict orders that no one should know this, and said that she should be given something to eat. The Gospel of the Lord. Well, I'm going to guess that probably all of us have in common the fact that we multitask. How many of you multitask? We all pretty much multitask, don't we? And this past week, knowing that after this Mass and the baptism after, I back out of the driveway for 5 months of my sabbatical, I have put multitasking on warp drive, and have tried to accomplish many things. Some have asked, how do you plan to be away and pack to be away for 5 months? And the truth is, I have no idea. And the greater problem was clearing off the desk. That's the greater problem. Multitasking is something that we all do, and I suppose any good parent knows how to multitask. To be the drop-offs and the pickups of all of the kids, to be the chores in between all of those drop-off and pickups and the projects around the house, so all of the multitasking that gets done. I know I multitask in many ways. I tend to read my email while I'm on hold. So I have the phone in one hand and I'm going through my email. The downside to that is I often forget who I'm holding for. Creates a small problem, multitasking. I put my mail into different stacks. You probably do the same. You sort it out, and I have the stack of junk mail. We all get that. And I tend to open the junk mail while I'm talking on the phone. Not too big of a problem because it all ends up in the garbage anyways. I do talk while driving, hands-free, and I have, as many of you do, that nice lady who lives in my dashboard. And all I do is press a button and tell her who to call, and she connects me. She does make some mistakes every so often. I suppose she's also multitasking. I'm not sure, but pretty accurate. And, I'm Polish. And, the Sunday paper, what's the most important part of the Sunday paper for anyone who's Polish? The coupons. I cut out all of the coupons. And I stack all of the coupons up, and I cut them maybe as I'm cooking or eating so I can multitask doing that as well. Multitasking. There are some dangerous multitaskers. I see them daily. Those who drive and text at the same time. Very dangerous multitasking. I have seen people eat while they are driving. I suppose it's a particular skill, but also a dangerous mode of multitasking. I have also seen some gentlemen shaving while they are driving. I don't know how they pulled that off, but a very dangerous multitask. And I have caught some of the ladies putting on makeup while driving. Another dangerous multitask. I don't care how good we are. If we multitask, we're distracted. We even call the last few distracted driving. That's what we call it. But no matter what multitasking we do, it's impossible to give 100% clear thought to two or more things at the same time. It's impossible. There's one exception, of course, and that exception is Jesus and the gospel today. He has certainly taken multitasking to a new level, and Jesus always, God the Father always, knows every single thing going on in our lives, undivided attention for us all. God's the only one who can pull that off. And what do we see in this multitasking today? Well, we see Jairus come. First of all, Jesus is in the crowd, and we see Jairus come and kneel before Jesus and ask, "Come heal my daughter." And Jesus, even though there's a large crowd, he focuses his attention just on Jairus and that need and begins to go towards his home. Of course, on the way, they meet the woman caught in the affliction of hemorrhages for 12 years. And all she does is touch him. He feels the power go out. And then he focuses immediately upon her, amidst the entire crowd, amidst the mission of going to Jairus' house. Undivided attention on this woman. We hear they get to the house and we hear about the mourners. And he focuses on them in the midst of everything and puts them out, we hear. And then we hear he invites Peter, James, and John to come in with him. And these three have his undivided attention often. It's the same three that Jesus calls to be on top of the mountain at the moment of the Transfiguration. It's also the same three who are with him in the Garden of Gethsemane. These three are given special undivided attention in Jesus' ministry. And of course we hear as Jesus goes along with these apostles, Mr. and Mrs. Jairus are there. They too are present when Jesus gives his undivided attention to their daughter to raise her from the dead. Jesus is about the only one who can multitask with perfect efficiency. And really, for all of us, we have to be aware of the distractions in our life. And maybe the real question, the real thought is, what are the distractions in our life? What are the distractions in our lives that keep us from having that clear focus on Jesus day in and day out? We have many distractions in the busyness of life, and we need to address those distractions and to go a little deeper than the distractions of our life and the details of our life to a deeper meaning. If you think for a moment, the people in the gospel today were able to do that. Mr. and Mrs. Jairus, the parents of this 12-year-old girl, even though there were all these mourners at the house, they were able to dismiss them, not pay any attention, but remain focused in faith, just as Jesus called Jairus to do when he first approached him. Do not be afraid. Have faith. They were able to do that. The woman with the hemorrhages, despite the large crowd, she was focused. She was focused. All I got to do is touch his clothing, and I will be well. She had absolute faith and was completely focused upon it. These individuals had one mission in mind. That was mission of faith and the healing that they sought from Jesus. And what is the real focus of these miracles? We can get distracted maybe by the miracles and the deeper meaning we can miss. The woman with the hemorrhages, of course, was healed physically, but there was a far greater healing that took place that could be overlooked. What was that greater healing? Well, because this woman was so afflicted for 12 years, she was ritually impure. By Mosaic law, she was ritually impure and not allowed to be part of the community. So the greater healing that Jesus gave to this woman was to bring her back to the community of believers, to bring her back into the community in which she lived, and not to be ritually impure and, if you will, ostracized. That was the deeper healing, the restoration of her life to the community. And really, it's the same type of healing that Jesus afforded Mr. and Mrs. Jairus and their daughter. The restoration of family life and the community therein of the family, restoring their daughter to life, giving her back to her parents. Simple question: are we really in communion with one another? Are we really in communion with one another? I don't know about you, but the more I listen to the news, the more division I hear about rather than communion within the community. And if you think for a moment, families today more and more are experiencing estrangement from one another. Families are under tremendous stress and division. I see it all the time, especially at the time of a funeral. It's a time that you really get to meet families, and at times you get to see which families are strongly united and which ones are sharply divided. Remember a funeral? I probably have told you the story before. A funeral I had a number of years ago. It was the night before the funeral. There was no wake. I don't like funerals without wakes. First of all, the wake is important for the healing process to take place. But secondly, it's an opportunity for families to share stories and for those of us celebrating the Mass to get to know the family. And there was no wake for this family. And it was a very Catholic family. I believe he had 8 or 9 children, the gentleman who died. So he was a good Catholic, a lot of kids. And I realized there was a problem by the evening before the funeral because I received, if I recall correctly, was either 4 or 5 completely different sets of funeral arrangements. Music, readings, readers, complete different. And so one of the children was a parishioner, so I called her and I said, "What's going on here?" And she said, "Well, we hate one another." She said, "That's why there's no wake." So we didn't know what would happen if we would all be in the same room together. She said, honestly, I don't even know what's going to happen when we're all in church together tomorrow. And we talked for a little while, and I told her, I said, well, since I see you every weekend, your funeral plans are in, the other ones are out, and we'll deal with this. And after the homily at the funeral that day, I walked down to the casket and I put my hand on it. And I said to them, I said, your poor father, he was a good man. I knew him. And I said, your poor father is rolling over in his grave before you drive him there in the next hour when he sees how you're behaving. And I said, I know you're not speaking to one another. And I said, if you're planning to come to communion at this Mass, you better use the sign of peace wisely to reconcile. Came time for the sign of peace, and I was sweating bullets. And it was a beautiful sight to behold, and went on for probably about 15 minutes as they got out of their benches to talk to one another and begin to reconcile. The need of healing of the estrangements in families is unbelievable. The need of healing in circles of friends, people who no longer speak to one another and they don't even remember why. We just remember we're angry at each other. The estrangement in parish life, people who get upset or angry over something and they no longer participate in the life of their parish or church. We need to really look at this level of healing which the gospel calls us to today. And the real life and death situation wasn't the healing of the hemorrhages or the healing of raising someone from the dead, but was the reunification of family, the reunification of community. That was the healing. And real healing is from these estrangements. And what's required for healing to take place is love, mercy, and forgiveness. And underneath all of that, you begin with humility. If you notice, Jairus knelt before Jesus. If you notice, the woman with hemorrhages knelt before Jesus. The act of humility. Humility is required in order to have that love, mercy, and forgiveness to bring healing. So what needs to be healed in your life? Your family, your circle of friends? What needs to be healed in our parish, family, and our church? We need to reflect on that and to be humble enough, to be loving enough, to be forgiving enough, to be merciful enough, to extend and ask for that gift of healing, to reunify the community and the circle of family and friends.